Go for it.
Yeah, I'm just, like the journey that God has taken me on, it brings tears to my eyes. It's hard to see because I got glasses on today, but the place that I was, like I'm thinking way back, like 40 years ago to where I am now, even in the last 10 years, all the things that I've gone through, which, my life was not easy. I've had a lot of challenges. And I remember one day going, Lord, I'm tired of going around and around the same mountain. I just want you to take me through whatever it is that I have to go through until I come out on the other side and I look like you. And I opened my Bible and he gave me Isaiah 54 when it says, when you walk through the fire, I'll be there. And through the flood, it will not overtake you. And I was like, yeah, okay, that's my scripture. I'm holding on to that one. And I'm not saying like all my problems went away and everything got magically better because it didn't. Life continued to be challenging. Like things were not easy for a long time. And some of it was of my own doing, like there's a law of sowing and reaping. You definitely reap the things that you sow. And I wasn't making great choices, things that maybe I was a little bit too impulsive and I should have just paused and waited. But I constantly just said, Lord, use this to make me like you. Use this. Don't let it be wasted. I don't want anything that I've gone through to be wasted. And it's because of the things that I've gone through, including my health journey. Like I was a career ICU nurse and worked in the ER on occasion. I mostly worked in the ICU. And like the definition of intensive care is intense, like it's stressful. It takes a toll. And then life at home was stressful and I love being a mom, but having five kids, that's can be a little stressful sometimes. And then being a single mom with five kids can be stressful. And I just remember, over and over just saying, God, whatever it is, just use it, just use it, just use it. And all the physical challenges that I've had, that gives me I'm just going to use the word authority. Like I know what I'm talking about. Like I've actually been there. I've actually done it, like it's actually happened to me. What I speak from is because of my own journey, like from pain to purpose. Like all my pain now has a purpose. It's not for nothing. It didn't just like happen to me. It happened through me. And and I'm just say, just use it all, use it all. So that's just, and I just I've been really trying to live my life from a place of gratitude where I am grateful. Like, even when I write the bills out, I used to go, oh my gosh, I hate paying bills. I hate
I
it.
still do.
Yeah. What now when I write, I just, it's the first of the month. So I just, reconcile my checkbook and I always put in the bills for the whole month and just say, here's what it is. This is what I got to do. And I just, as I'm typing it into my Quicken, I'm just like, thank you, Lord, for these bills. I just thank you, Lord, for all the bills that I have. I thank you for my ability to pay them. I wrote down on my thing, I took out all my, I can't see don't see the totals, but I took out in my, all the things that I have, school loans and stuff like that. And I just said, Lord, I just forgive those people that I am indebted to, just like you've forgiven me. I know that all those things, you have given me the ability to do all these things. And I just thank you for all the things that are going to come to me because because I just walk in this gratitude and this forgiveness. And
Mhm.
so I've started, it was funny, I pulled this journal out. I had this picture in my head of this journal somebody gave me as a gift years and years and years ago. And I didn't think I had written in it anything. And I was like, I know where it is in that box in the attic. I'm going to go get it. That's my gratitude journal. And so I went up and I found it. It was right on the top of this box, and I pulled it out and I'm like, oh, I love this. It's wooden. It's just beautiful. And I opened it up, to the first blank page and I wrote in the date and I wrote some things that I was grateful for. And it was so funny because the next day when I opened it up, I had actually written in this as a gratitude journal in 2018, like, which is when I recorded my CD and I was in nursing, like a master's program and my naturopathic program all at the same time. And I was like, the Lord, I had to use the same journal to be my gratitude journal. Totally forgot that. So I just like, okay, well, I just kind of like rode through it and flipped to where the next page was. It was half full of gratitude. And I was just like, thank you, Lord. This is gratitude. This is where I want to live from, is this place of gratitude. So our topic today is the mind-body connection, and how, it affects our mind and our emotional person, who we are, the soul part of who we are, how it affects our physical body. And, we are created, we are spirit, soul, and body. We cannot separate. Just like an egg is the yolk, it's the white, it's the shell, it's all three. And you cannot, like, they overlap all the time.
Hmm.
And, I often use the illustration where, this overlap occurs. If I go out and I stub my toe really hard, if I do it hard enough, it might bring tears to my eyes. I might actually like cry. That's a emotional response to a physical stimulus. But on the other hand, I've definitely had patients when I worked in the cath lab and I worked in the CCU, the coronary critical care unit. I had patients who would come in on EKG, they had these big tombstone changes. It looked like they were having like this huge heart attack, and they would have crushing chest pain radiating to their jaw and down their left arm, that classic. And you take them down to the cath lab and they go in with a little camera and they'd be like, no blockages. So they'd bring the patient out and wake them up. And this is the true story. So I had this lady, she's probably like 78 or something. And she was coming to, and she's waking up and I was holding her hand, and I said, she's like, how did I do? What happened? And I was like, you didn't have any blockages. Everything was fine. And she's like, really? And I said, yeah. I said, can you tell me what's going on, and what's going on at home? And she said, oh, honey, my cat, he was my everything. He was 20 and he just died, and I don't have anybody else. She literally had a physical manifestation of an emotional issue. It was a physical response to her emotion. They call it broken heart syndrome. That
Hmm.
happens all the time. And like in ancient wisdom in medicine and Ayurveda and Chinese medicine that had been around for 5,000 years, they knew this. Like they had this. And we often see this all the time, where physical they recognize the emotional component of the physical ailment. And so sometimes when I'm working with people and I see things and they're like, we're making really good progress, and then all of a sudden like we just kind of stall, I'm like, let's talk about what's going on. And then we start to delve into some of the things that maybe either is happening to them right now or happened to them, years ago. And they, or have these emotional things, these traumas, big traumas or mini traumas, that kind of all add up. And then they start to get stuck in different places in their body. This emotional energy gets stuck in their body, and they can't get well because, and often it manifests like, if you look in Chinese medicine, that you look at the different organ systems as they relate to the different emotions, like I can't even tell you, like probably thousands and thousands of times as I've worked with people, we will start to explore the emotional thing and say it's someone with like thyroid issues. Um, I often, start to talk to them and, how are you feeling? What about this and what about that? And I'm like, and they're like, oh, I just feel so vulnerable. I just feel so lost. And I'm like, would you look at that? The thyroid is correlated to this Chinese element of fire, and that relates to this feeling of lost and vulnerable. And they're like, how did you know? And I'm like, because it's ancient wisdom. It's been there forever. We're just finally recognizing it in this modern age where we think that we have all the bells and whistles to everything, that there really is a correlation and things really do matter. And then as we start to heal those emotional things, then all of a sudden the thyroid starts to respond to all the things that we've been trying to do. And it's just amazing. to see that happen over and over and over.
Yeah, the mind-body connection is certainly real. I know we were talking for a good while before starting this video or podcast about just things that we go through in life, whether they're challenges. Well, not to get on a long-winded rabbit trail, but just, bottom line, to have ourselves anchored. I know from like your background with our faith and my faith, being believers and having just ourselves anchored into the word. I think for most part, there's a lot of believers out there, and I can attest to this. I used to be one of them. We breeze over so many scriptures. We just kind of read it for face value. Um, a couple of them that I read off here, the most popular one, Romans 12:2, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and prove what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. Well, the renewing of your mind. And I was sharing with you a book by Dr. Carolyn Leaf, and it's
Yeah,
called Effect on Your Brain
I love her.
and renewing your mind. And so oftentimes, I know like negative thoughts, trauma from our childhood experiences, and even PTSD. There's several studies at the VA from soldiers who have gone overseas to Afghanistan, Iraq, or wherever. They have these flashback moments from a trigger and an external stimuli. Well, anyway, these have negative impacts on our brain chemistry and how we relive these moments. And rather, how do we renew our mind? How do we renew that in the word, or how do we renew these past experiences? And it's definitely not an overnight thing. It doesn't just happen like that, although God can completely renew a person in an instant if he wanted to. From my experience, it's never been something that's just instant. It's usually a long working process. And I think it's that way just because it helps teach me to teach others the same way how to overcome something, as you were just encouraging me with your wisdom and knowledge about what I'm going through and how to overcome this stuff. And so Philippians 4:8 is another one.
I
Finally, brothers
love
and
that.
sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is
Yeah,
right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. And
yeah.
you've referenced this colleague in his book before several times in our previous podcasts, Bruce Lipton,
Mm-hmm.
the biology.
Wow.
He essentially says our thoughts are proteins.
Yep.
Now, I guess what that means is for the person watching, our thoughts are proteins. Basically, the proteins are the building blocks that are used to communicate within our body to our cells. So, like the way you and I are communicating right now, we're first formulating our words with thoughts, and we're putting them together with letters and phrases to create sentences, and then I'm communicating to you an idea or a concept. And while our body will use whatever's going on up here, what we ruminate on at night, fears, what we're anxious about, what we're insecure about, or, whatever, that'll communicate kind of behind the scenes, like our body's eavesdropping in on, I hear you. So you're calling yourself unworthy, or you're not good enough, or you're not smart enough, or you're not going to get that promotion, or you'll never be able to accomplish that goal, or you're never going to be good enough, or you're never going to be able to fit in that dress again. Or, you've got this adversary who's always sowing discord over here.
Even if he doesn't, he plants a seed in our own minds, take over. We just,
Sure.
he really just only needs to like put that little seed of doubt in there and our minds just take over if that's the track that it's used to going down.
Mhm. And it's
Yeah.
like, what are we watering? Are we
Yeah.
watering that seed of doubt, which
Yeah.
I've fallen victim to several times? Or am I gonna, like you mentioned earlier, no, we got to take that thought captive and make it obedient to Christ.
Yeah.
Any thought that tries to exalt itself above what the word tells us.
Yeah.
Uh, Another one was Ephesians 4:23, to be made new in the attitude of your minds.
Yeah.
It's like, well, okay, our attitude has a lot to do with everything on how
Yeah.
we express ourselves, how we conduct our behavior with one another. And obviously, Chuck Swindoll wrote it best. And I don't remember exactly what he said, but he talked about, I get to choose how I want to respond and
Yeah.
react,
Oh yeah.
regardless of the circumstances.
Yeah.
I can allow my external circumstances to affect my joy and rob my happiness,
Yeah.
or I can say, no, despite what's going on out here, I can still
Yeah.
remain to be, at peace because I know who I am. I know what
100%.
my identity is.
Yeah. There's such a, like there's another scripture that talks about, life and death is in the power of the tongue. Our
Mm.
our words have the ability to create life, or they have the ability to create death. And, when we take a thought and we speak it, those two things in combination, that's an action. And that has more positive inertia than if we just thought it. So it's bad enough to think it, but then when we also speak it out, that's like, so you're taking that and now you're sowing it. And so it's the law of sowing and reaping. So you're like, oh, I'll never have enough money to pay these bills. And so the law of sowing and reaping says, okay, you're never going to have enough money to pay these bills because you just sowed that and you believed it, right? And there's a huge disconnect sometimes between the things that we think and the things that we actually believe in our heart. That's where, we sort of have this discord between, even as some Christians say that they're believers because they believe certain things,
Mhm.
and do we really? Like, do we really believe that I am who God says that I am? Do I really believe that He is enough? Do I really believe that He is all I need? Do I believe that He is my sufficient one? Do I believe that He is my provider? Do I believe that He is my healer? All the Hebrew names, the things that the words of God says He is. Well, we say it because we read it and they go, well, I'm supposed to believe it because I say that I do. My name says that I believe it. But do we really? Because if we really believed in our hearts everything that we, think in our head, we would act in a different way than what we do sometimes. Like our actions would be a reflection of what what is in our heart. So oftentimes taking every thought captive really, I'm coming to learn this more and more and more, is two things. First of all, my life needs to be look like what Galatians Paul talks about, the fruits of the spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, and all that.
Mhm.
If it doesn't look like that, then I'm actually speaking the opposite language. So I'm actually speaking the language not of God, but of the enemy. And so there's that, so if the things that are coming out of my mouth, or the things that are thinking in my thoughts, or don't line up with those good things, every good and perfect gift, those fruits of the spirit, they're coming from the spirit, another spirit, and it's not a good one. And so then what we have to do is when those thoughts come in, we have to immediately go, no, that doesn't look like this. I'm going to flip it around. So I just started, I just really started working on this even more in the last couple of weeks. And when I'd have a thought come in, like, man, like the bills, like the money, oh, I don't have enough. I can't afford that. I'm like, instead of saying I can't afford that, I'm going to say I'm choosing to not spend my money in that way right now. In the future, I will choose to do that. And it just totally deflates that negative thing and then goes out of the way. And the more you practice that, the easier it becomes. It's like a muscle, like you have muscle memory to be able to take that thought and go no, and you replace it with a positive one. So it's not enough to say no and shut it down. You like recognize it's there, make a conscious choice to say no, and then make another really powerful conscious choice to say, I'm going to replace that with something that's life-giving, not something that's going to steal. The John 10:10, the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy. So, but God, Christ comes to give us life abundant. So if it looks like something that's going to steal from me, kill me, destroy me, then I'm going to say, nope, I choose life. And I'm going to replace that negative thought with something that's going to look like, you know, something that's going to give me life and something that's going to build me up and add to me instead of taking away from me.
100%. And I agree with all of that. And it's way easier said than done because it takes a lot of practice. And I think about the people who are out there who maybe have experienced, I mean, we all have our own baggage, we all have our own stories, and we all have our own traumas to some degree, and some worse than others. And I think about the people who have like the worst traumas that, we were fortunately spared from or just blessed to not be a part of, right? But I know like you and I have both shared stories of one another's past, and we have some pretty
We
uh
have some pretty
terrible
pretty big
things, right?
stuff. I have some pretty big stuff. You want to know more about it? DM me, I'll tell you.
But there's some people, who like they're trapped in a mentality, whether it be a victim mentality or they just can't, they hold on to unforgiveness from a person that maybe have molested or raped them in their childhood years. And it's really hard to first, find the right person who knows how to appropriately help you through the situation. I just, for people who are stuck in these patterns, because it does take a toll on your health and it shortens your lifespan, it rewires your brain to look at ways and a pessimistic view or a negative outlook on life. And I used to be a very pessimistic person. I don't know how.
Me too.
And, I still battle. It's still a constant battle every day. It really is a work in progress. You have to intentionally choose um, what you want to do up here. Remember, I shared with you just before we went out of town for Passover that my 9-year-old who has no, prior medical history of anything,
Yeah.
never really been sick or anything like that, no issues whatsoever. Just had this like we're going to baseball practice on a Monday, and then out of nowhere is like I can't breathe, almost like a panic attack.
Mhm.
And it kind of caught me and my wife off guard because we're like, this has never happened. What do we do? I don't get it. Why is this occurring? And so, fleshly reaction, human reaction, go to the ER, figure out what's going on with him because we parked, pulled over, took him out of the car, kind of, walked with him, calmed him down. So we didn't really know what was going on, right? We're just thinking, all right, life or death, he's in danger. But my wife and I are also processing this, given our Christian background, our faith background, that, this is a demonic attack, spiritual attack. We need to pray. We understood that after we had prayed, it did bring him a little comfort and it did bring a little relief. We still, out of caution, took him to the ER. What was funny was like the ER did this little psychological trick. They put oxygen on him and put the, what's the little thing
The
called?
pulse
Pulse
ox probe.
oximeter
Hmm.
on his hand, measured him, everything. Everything is great. Everything's fine. They never had the oxygen on. And they didn't tell none of us this until afterward. The guy came in and he's like, this ain't even on. And we're all like, really? And I knew in my heart of hearts that something else was going on. It was a spiritual attack because we're getting ready to go to Passover. And every time a feast comes around or something that we do that involves a big church event or a gathering or whatever, there's always some type of spiritual attack that we have to like, pray through and go up against. I don't know if you experience these things, but it's like anytime we're doing some type of kingdom work, it's like all right, bust out the shield, bust out the sword, and get your armor on. We're not
Yes.
retreating, moving forward.
Yes.
So I documented all this for my son, and one thing that I taught him and was telling him, and this happened again, even en route when we were on the road going to Missouri, going to our event. And so I was like, I wanted to teach you, using the word against fear and anxiety and panic attacks. First, let's try to figure out where the root of fear and anxiety and panic attacks come from. So I took him to John 10:10 and I said, hey, look, you know, Jesus or Yeshua explained that the thief, the adversary, his main goal is to steal, to kill, and destroy, and no matter what form or fashion that looks like. So maybe it's wanting to rob your joy. Well, what's the opposite of joy? It's not happiness. Well, what's the opposite of your peace or your life? Or what's the opposite of fear and anxiety? Well, obviously it would be happiness and joy, and you wouldn't have fear. So I took him first to Psalm 144 because if we think about David, King David, I mean, this is a guy who was a man after God's own heart. Obviously he impregnated his best friend's wife, got him killed, and he was a normal person
He
too. Who
did
has
some stuff.
stuff like we all do. But when you
Yeah.
it's like, oh my goodness, these are normal people. But I think a lot of times for the most majority of people, we read these as just stories. I mean,
Yeah.
gloss over all the nitty-gritty details of that.
Yes.
These are real people that experience real life events just like you and I, and these are tangible things that
Yeah.
just were documented. This is a Psalm of David. It says, praise be to Yahweh, my rock, who trains my hands for war, my fingers for battle. He is my loving God and my fortress, my stronghold and my deliverer, my shield in whom I take refuge, who subdues peoples under me. And that's just the first two verses. I encourage you to go back and read the entire psalm. That was just one. So I was trying to tell my son, I was like, you got to think about this. We're going up against an enemy who's very smart, knows this really well. And if we're to be a general or a lieutenant, a commander of an army or over a little battalion of guys, and we're the leader, we can't show signs of weakness. We can't cower down and give in to the fear. But you got to think, he's training your hands for war. He's training your fingers for battle. What do we do with our hands and fingers? We use these things for our bows, carry our equipment, our sword, our shield. And I said, he's looking at God as a strong tower, his fortress where he can run to refuge for safety. And when you think about the power that these scriptures really bring, um, Isaiah 41:10, do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be afraid, for I'm your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. 2 Timothy 1:7, for God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and of a sound mind, going back up here, or of self-control.
Yep.
There's so many that we can go on with. Again,
Yeah.
our Savior in John 14, peace I leave with you,
Yeah.
my peace I give to you, not as the
Not as the
world
world
gives,
gives. Yeah.
but let your hearts not be troubled, neither let them be afraid.
Yeah.
And the more I spoke these, and we had to rehearse this so much the whole
Yeah.
time we were like every day. When we come back to Texas, he's like, Dad, it's gone. I don't have this no more.
Mhm.
And I was just like, wow. And
Yeah.
so I have this whole little thing here just to kind of show him as a remembrance and that he can use
Yeah.
paper with all these scriptures. So if
Yeah.
for whatever reason, the enemy will try to also attack us with lying symptoms,
Yeah.
make you think that you haven't been delivered, and again, make you think
Yeah.
that you're not free of illness or disease and that you're still struggling. And we can look at ourselves on the outward appearance and be like, but I'm overweight. But like you were telling me earlier, or speaking just a little bit ago about the bills, that I'll never be able to pay these. And we get stuck in that mentality of that perpetual problem that'll just always be there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just like a computer program, we have to rewire that circuitry, you
Yeah.
know.
A lot of it comes from changing your identity. We've talked before about chronic illness and how that oftentimes becomes our identity. Or our identity can be anything. I'm always going to be poor. I'm never good enough.
Mhm.
Nothing I do ever is right. That becomes who we are. The things that we repeat and say over and over and over again, they become part of who we are. It becomes part of our core. And as you said earlier, like our brain literally releases these neuropeptides, these nervous system proteins that are like a track of a truck that the truck goes down like a muddy road, and it creates this rut in the road where over and over and over and over and over, the deeper and deeper and deeper the track gets. And so it takes some there's different things that you can do, but they used to think that once it was a certain way, that was it, done, can't. Now Carolyn Leaf did a lot of like progressive work in the study of neuroplasticity, meaning we can actually rewire our brain. We can make it so that we can change those tracks so that the truck goes down a different pathway than the one it's been going on. And like we said, that comes with renewing our mind. It also comes with changing our identity. And part of what I do besides gratitude, I do this every morning. Besides gratitude, I have different sheets of paper that I kind of go through, and I'll read about 20 or 40, depending on how much time I have, affirmations. This is who I am. One of them I typed up was I exist too. It's all my purpose. What my purpose is in my career, what my purpose is in my relationships. This is based on the book I'm reading from Dr. Josh Axe called Think This, Not That, all about mindset and changing your mindset. And so, finding your purpose. So I exist in my career you know, to share everything that has been imparted to me with others so that I can see people become a better version of themselves. I exist in my relationships to build people up, to love them, to give to them. I exist with my finances to be able to be a blessing to others, to receive much so that I can give much away. I exist in my what's the other one? In my health, that my body, I exist to be a living demonstration of the power of positive lifestyle and health and how to live from what I know and what I believe. And I forget what the other one is. So I did that one. And then I have one that's like all affirmations that it's based on, what I did was I took every negative thought that I have and I struggle with, and I flipped it around. And I made it a positive. So for a long, long time, I struggled with, I'm not enough. I'm not enough, And so I just wrote, I am more than enough. Not just I'm enough. I am more than enough. Everything that I have is given unto me for everything that I need. Everything that I need in my in to see change still in my physical body, even though I've come so incredibly far, I still have things that, aren't quite where I want them to be. So I have everything that I need to see my physical journey so I can walk out my days in health and wellness. And all of the limiting beliefs, I struggle with rejection and abandonment for a lot of different reasons. I am loved and accepted. I'm loved and accepted by God. He is everything that I need. I am loved and accepted by my friends. I draw to me positive relationships and positive friendships. Um, I talk about, I love and accept myself just where I am and who I am in the process of growing and maturing that I'm at in my life. And so I just took every negative thought that I had and I flipped it over and I just, so I take turns, because I read maybe like one full page, sometimes two full pages every morning. I just kind of cycle through them over and over and over. I talk about who I am as a provider, who I am as an entrepreneur, who I am as a mom, who I am um, as a wife, who I am as a musician, who I am as a minister, who I am as a worship leader, who I am, and everything that I am, and all the things that I maybe struggle with that those little negative things come in. I just flipped it around because the more my mouth speaks the positive and my ears hear it, that's part of what it takes to change the thought processes. And so then those newer pathways change in our brain. The other thing that I do that we've talked about in the past is something called neuroemotional technique. It is literally, it has been studied. They've done thousands of studies now at this point. There's over 1,000 now where they've studied how this procedure, how this technique literally changes. It frees up the things in our past that kept us captive, where we were constantly reminded of that thing again and again and again. Not just that it frees up the past, but it literally stops those neuropeptides from being released and it changes our brain and it changes our heart rate variability. It changes our stress response. So there's lots of things that we can do. So saying that it's impossible to change, saying that this is the way it is and it's always going to be this way, we have to shift that into a more possibility thinking where there is, realizing that there is a way to change, that doesn't have to be this way, that there are ways to become a better version of yourself, to ascend from what you've been to what you are and grow and to be even more of, because even though I have grown like by leaps and bounds over the last 40 something years, I know that the best is yet to come. I'm still growing. I still have so much room to grow and so many positive expressions of myself. So because the more I can become a better person and a better version of who I am, the more I'm able to do what I'm called to do. And the more people I'm able to reach in a positive way to see their lives impacted. Because 1 + 1 = 2. But then after a certain point, you just start to have this exponential increase where the more I give to others, the more others give, and then thousands and millions of people are impacted then. That's what I want to see. That's my purpose.
That's amazing. And just to clarify all of this for the viewer, in that the mind-body connection and why this is so important is because I believe we've been conditioned for so many generations now, with, Western medical, conventional medicine practices. And I didn't learn this stuff as a child. So when you hear the old dogma that, well, my parents had diabetes, my mom had cancer, my dad had heart disease, therefore I'm going to get it too. Well, here's the way to think about that. Keyword think. You can think, okay, if I live the exact same lifestyle as my mom and dad, I have a really good chance of probably getting, cancer and heart disease. However, if you alter the lifestyle choices that you make, you can probably have a better trajectory of not getting cancer and heart disease, despite those two being the number one and number two killers still in the United States. 95% of heart disease and cancer are lifestyle choices, lifestyle and environmental effects on our body.
Mhm.
And what you were saying on too, just to clarify for the viewers as well about the mind-body connection, is that toxic thinking patterns about, self-worth, self-value, insecurity, um, and ruminating on all these processes. So if you, Mr. or Mrs., at the end of your day and you're just lying in bed and you're mind dumping or you're thinking about everything, really start to pay attention what it is that you're thinking about and what's going through up here, because that will carry over into the next day. How many thoughts that we have per day, but how many of those thoughts are repeated from the day before and they're rehearsed from past memories? And so when I was saying that we've been conditioned, it's just like whenever you train yourself to learn a G chord or a C chord and the muscle memory of what you got to form with your hand to play that chord on a guitar
Yep.
or to memorize the keys on a piano. It's repetition. And the more you do that, you don't need the paper in front of you that teaches you that tutors you how to play the song, because it gets in your heart and you just know it and you
Yep.
can play it. And then it
Yep.
becomes kind of your own and you can make your own melody and harmony from it. And you no longer need that tutor. Well, the same thing with our conditioning of our thought processes. The more that we rehearse and we do these things and these patterns, the more that activity will affect us. So whether it's negative or positive. So those toxic thinking patterns, such as the constant negativity, or even making a mountain out of a molehill, is what we used to say. That can exacerbate the activity of this portion in our brain called the amygdala, which basically controls all of the emotions, like with fear and this, that, and the other, within our brain. And it'll create a negative feedback loop where that portion of your brain, it'll have a heightened response that reinforces the negative thought pattern. And
Hmm.
essentially what that does is the more one engages in toxic thinking, the more that portion of your brain learns to respond excessively. Just like I was saying about the music, it could be any analogy, riding a bike. You fall and scrape your knee and it hurts, you get back up, you keep going until you get good at it. And it's just
Yeah.
muscle memory.
Yeah.
Well, the more that your brain will respond, entrenching both the emotional response and that toxic thought pattern. So basically just overthinking, over exaggerating a situation can exacerbate the activity of that little piece in your brain called the amygdala. And the research suggests that negativity can lead to increased activity in the brain, which can exacerbate a toxic process. And what it does is it can actually go on to create Parkinson's disease.
Hmm.
And then it highlights how negative emotional states can feed back into the neural process, potentially contributing to conditions characterized by a dysfunctional, I don't like saying amygdala because they may not be familiar with that, but just
A
portions
part
of
of
your
your
brain.
brain that controls a lot of your emotions and thoughts. Yeah.
And the study comes from molecular neurobiology from 2021.
Mhm.
So that's
Yeah.
pretty fresh off the press for how new
Yeah.
that is.
Yeah. There's so much research. I was at a conference a couple weeks ago, and this research, I forget what his exact research, I forget what his exact title was. He's a physician who specializes in research, and he's been working. He does a lot of work with genetics. He does a lot of not just genetics, DNA, but he does a lot of work with the mind-body connection and how, our thoughts control and change. It can increase telomere lengths of the little pieces at the end of the little rungs of the DNA, how it can change our neural pathways in our brain. And he worked with Joe Dispenza on one of his retreats with just meditation, and how just doing that. I worked on a research project when I was still working in the hospital, and we were doing it on the effects of like mindfulness meditation, deep breathing, and I did um, not neuroemotional technique. I did tapping, emotional freedom technique, and how that affected heart rate and pain and blood pressure. Like changing our brain literally affects our physiology. It changes our pain. It changes everything. It's so connected, and it changes it changes our blood. It changes the strands of DNA. It changes so much um, of us physically in our physical body and a physical part of who we are just by changing our mind and our thoughts and our emotions about things. There's a powerful connection.
You talked about meditation, and there's so many scriptures that cite the word meditate. I know there's a lot of believers who may think that that's like a new age mystical practice, but Psalm 1 2, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord and who meditates on his law day and
Day
night.
and night. Mhm.
And
He
so
will
that
be
tells
like a
me that
tree planted by the rivers of living water that brings good fruit and good season. Is
Prospers in season, and his
yeah,
leaf does
his
not wither.
leaves do not wither. Yep, that's
That
amazing.
tells me that this person, so we know that the word is living, it's alive, it's powerful. It's a discerner in the intents of the thoughts in the heart. So there we go. The word will discern you, it will read you.
Yeah.
And when we get that stuff out, it will radically change who we are. It'll alter the way we function, it'll alter our behavior, and it'll make us more in line to be that prosperous tree by the streams of water.
And even if
I
you're not someone who doesn't believe like you're a Christian or think that, like, it's still okay. Like these principles still apply. Whatever you believe, that's neither here nor there. The whole principle of changing your thoughts and the laws of sowing and reaping still apply even in the
think
word. Like if I go jump off a building, gravity is a law that is going to take over whether I believe I can fly or not. There are certain laws that are set up to keep order in the universe, and so one of them is the law of cause and effect, and how our thoughts, changing our thoughts, will change who we are. That's a law. We cannot change that. So whether you believe in the things that we're talking about spiritually, that's okay. You don't have to. The laws still apply. Change your thoughts, you will change you. Changing your thoughts will change your physiology. Changing your thoughts and will affect your emotions. Your emotions affect your physiology. It all applies. So, just want to put that out there because I work in circles where, not everybody believes the same things that I do spiritually, but the other laws still apply. Just like I said, gravity is a law, whether I believe it or not. The law of inertia. If I slam on the brakes, my body's going to keep moving forward.
right?
So there are certain laws that are undeniable, have nothing to do with, that part of
Religion.
who I am.
Well, despite even just religious beliefs, even if you take another and cross-examine another religion, whether it's Hinduism or Buddhism, a lot of these ancient monks still have practices because they understood
100%. Yeah.
meditation. Like, that they're
Pause and think
calm.
about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the word ruminate too. Ruminate, like it's like a cow chewing its cud. It's bringing it back up. It's chewing on it, thinking over it. It's thinking, it's mulling it over, and then, kind of swallowing it and kind of taking it in again and then bringing it back up and thinking over. That's kind of like it's the same principle as meditation. So the things that we chew on all day long, do they
Yeah.
taste good? Do they give nourishment to our souls and to our mind and to our body, or do they not? Do they taste like yesterday's garbage? Right. So I like that word too. It really, it's just a different dimension of level, it's a different dimension or aspect of meditation, like ponder, and ruminate. They kind of go hand in hand, just in different, they're
Absolutely.
same kind of thing, but different implications.
Well, clinically speaking, let's put this in perspective for the viewer in that when we're looking at hormones, I like to use um, a Dutch test. When a woman's like, here she's in her mid 50s, let's say she's like a high level executive at a corporate company, has a family, has kids, loves to exercise, loves to jog, but lately things have been just way different, way more demands at work. We have inflation that affects everybody. Okay, gas prices at the pump are astronomical. A carton of eggs has gone up like 40% or whatever. Prices at the grocery store hitting high. Kids have practice, whether it be soccer, baseball, football, maybe it's horseback riding or something, archery, who knows, right? Um, these mothers, they're trying to do their best to support the family with the father and do everything they can to help. And, you go back to the word ruminating on. When I see the report, I'm like, man, your cortisol's flatlined. What's going on here? And then I'm trying to get a little bit more personal. I'm like, what are you ruminating on at night? What are you thinking about? Because
Yeah.
these thoughts are affecting your hormones, whether you know it or not.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just thinking about, do I have enough money for the bills?
Yeah.
I'm thinking about the demands that I have to meet for work, and I'm having to stay up extra late at night to get these demands done so I don't get
Yeah.
in trouble at work because
Yeah.
I need to have my job.
Yeah. The thing with besides flatline that I see, a lot of times I'll see in the beginning, it'll be
Super
where they're,
spiked.
it'll be super spiked, especially in like the
Yeah.
middle of the night when it's not supposed to be that high.
Right.
It's like, okay. So, and in the, from like a mental health kind of perspective, if someone deals with depression, oftentimes they have trouble falling asleep because
Hmm.
they're just, all these things are just keeping them up, just, and they just, so it just weighs them down. So they have trouble falling asleep. The opposite's true with anxiety. When someone is tends to be more anxious, the cortisol in the middle of the night is super high because they wake up and they're like, now I can't get back to sleep because the cortisol just shot up and they're like, oh, the lion is chasing me and I'm lying in my bed. And so it doesn't always apply. It's not always black and white, but a lot of times that's the case. So I will, when I see those things on a Dutch test, I'll go, are you having trouble sleeping? I already know this by the time I order it usually. But if I bring actually the opposite happens. We talk about it. I say, let's do a Dutch. And then we get the results and go, and that's why that's happening because, by the time it gets flatline, it's like, they're like way down the line.
Right. And
It's like, their adrenals are kind of like, okay, I'm done.
with the spike, that's what I was saying too, like with the differentiation. So I'm thinking of a person who's been worn out. And so the good thing with that test is you can tell, hey, your adrenals are still online. We're just in an
Yeah.
earlier stage. But if you
Yeah.
keep this up, you're going to go down here and be
Yeah.
flatline.
Because
And
the
we're talking
way,
about one,
yeah, so just for clarification, the way it's supposed to look is around 3 o'clock in the morning, your adrenal glands start to wake up and they start to produce cortisol. And it rises, rises, rises to about 7 or 8 in the morning, usually 7. It peaks like a Rocky Mountain, falls off pretty sleepy, and then it just kind of gradually declines. It's like a plateau, a valley through the rest of the day. That's normal. That's called the cortisol awakening response. That's what it's supposed to look like. And when we get these back and we see these different patterns, you know, we kind of can have a really good idea of what's going on and the best way for us to support them.
right? And for us, it's just kind of more so, okay, detective mode. Where are these stressors? Where are all those lions at in your life and where are they coming from? And going back,
Yeah.
asking those deeper questions like, what are you thinking on at night? Because I do want to know what a person is struggling with up here to help them kind of come back to calm. It's like, okay, what burdens are you carrying on up here that you can release? Because
Yeah.
oftentimes, whenever we do that, and it can tie into the unforgiveness, the bitterness, or maybe I have resentment, or maybe I have these other added stressors of those thoughts that we've been talking about with the mind body connection. When we teach people to go through these processes, they'll be like, wow, I feel 10 pounds lighter. Like I didn't know
Mhm.
releasing that released that stubborn weight that I had on me that I could never get rid of despite dieting correctly or
Mhm.
eating the perfect thing and exercising. And it's just because we're in a constant state of overwhelm and stress. And
Yeah. Yeah. And it's
amazing.
you know, like people come to me not I'm as a nurse practitioner, they don't necessarily come to me for their emotional and mental things,
Right.
right? So they come to me and we do the tests and we do the blood work and all the stuff and do the assessment and I give them my recommendations and food changes and all that stuff that I do, which is great as a part of it. But like I said, oftentimes when we get down the road and I mean, sometimes they don't do what I tell them, so that's different. But if they're doing everything right, then then we go, let's talk, let's just dig a little deeper. And my questionnaire, my intake form is really extensive. Like it's like 8 pages long, and everybody's like, oh my gosh. But it gives me so much good information. And I go back through and I'll look, did you have trauma? Have you, experienced any loss in the last year, the last 5 years, the last 10 years kind of thing. Do you find meaning and purpose in your life? That's actually a question I have. Um, do you have a good support system? How well do you deal with stress in your career, in your family, in your finances, in your school, education kind of thing? And it really gives me so good. So when some of the physical parts of who we are and all that kind of works or maybe works for a while and then stops, then I kind of go over into, okay, let's look at this emotional thing. Let's look at this. And the awesome thing is one of the tests that I run gives you a good measure of that. And so usually it's part of the toxin burdens that we look at. One of them is emotional. And so, I'll just kind of go look at that number and go, what are you going through? This was fine last time we checked. So yeah, and there's a definite connection and there's different things that we can do to make impact 100% all the time. You know, you're not defined by your past. You're not defined by your genetics. Like in functional medicine, we say our genetics load the gun and our environment pulls the trigger. But I'll just go further to say our environment includes our internal environment, like
Absolutely.
what's going on up here. So just because I have the genes for high blood pressure doesn't mean I'm going to have high blood pressure. What's going on around me, that's causing that gun to be loaded and then the trigger to be pulled to express itself in that way? And can I change that? 100% all the time. We can change that. We can change the epigenetic expression. We can change our cells. I read this book about this guy who was able to literally, with his mind only, he had broken his back and he was in a striker bed, could not move because if he did, he would be paralyzed. And he just literally kept every day he would go through and picture in his mind every bone knitting together and every neuron firing the way it's supposed to, and his um, spinal column just healing itself. And he literally walked out of the hospital just with his mind. He never had surgery. That's
Such an
how
incredible
powerful our
story.
thoughts are. It's
They're
the
extremely powerful.
Yeah. We
I
have
know
the
you.
ability to change things and do powerful things for good, or not so good in a negative way. That's how. And like I said, we manifest what we believe and what we speak. So if I keep
Mhm.
saying I'm never going to have enough, well, guess what? The world's going to give you never enough, because you just
Yeah.
said it, you believe it, and that's what's going to come back to you.
Mhm.
So I am a firm believer in the power of our words and the things, and the power of
Affirmations.
our thoughts, and making sure that we keep on the tip of our tongue and in the forefront of our mind, whatever's good and lovely and of good report, that the things that we talked about.
Absolutely, 100% agree. And I know we're coming up on the end of the hour here, running out of time. I would say that going back to what we always say, what's filling up your bucket, and a good way to assess that is just to think mental emotional, because most of us have some type of mental emotional baggage or trauma stemming from our childhood, adverse childhood events, and it somehow bleeds over into life. Or maybe you were fortunate and blessed enough to know how to deal with that at a young age, and it didn't really affect you much. But then again, we got to think about, okay, well, what type of biochemical stressors in my bucket do I have? Do I have silver fillings? Do I have unhealed teeth extractions, root canals? Do I have, gut issues, and why do we have gut issues? Do we have parasites? Do we have fungal overgrowth, candida, or do we have what's the other one? There's mental, emotional, chemical, biochemical. What's our indoor environment? Do we have mold somewhere, or do
EMFs,
we have physical EMFs? Another huge topic, absolutely. And then our physical trauma.
geophysical things. Yeah.
Do I have a broken arm? Did I go through surgery? Did I get in a car wreck? And when you start to connect the dots on all of these events throughout your life, you can kind of track your own
Yeah.
history timeline. Like, oh yeah, I
Yeah.
remember when I
And
was
those
12.
those are
It's,
all toxins that fill up our bucket, right? It's
yep.
not just bugs, right?
hmm I was
Any
in
of
a,
those things.
and there's all kinds of examples that we can give, but what you need to do is learn how to look back at your own health history and try to connect those dots.
Our bucket fills, we've used this analogy a bunch of times. We fill our bucket. It should, in theory, drain. That
hmm
it's like the sink with the pipe, the drain. But when it doesn't drain fast enough, or we're putting more stuff in faster than we can then drain it, all it takes is that one thing. It's like, and the stressors that hit our bucket, it takes that one thing to create what we call that perfect storm. And then all the stuff starts splashing out. And then that's what we have, that manifests as symptoms and sickness and disease. So but part of the way we drain our bucket is by the renewing of our mind. It is by meditation. It is, breathing, deep breathing. One of the things that we did in the article, or the research project I did, we did three things. So we did mindfulness meditation or heartfulness meditation. Huge, like they had already done a study in the hospital where I worked that showed that you can increase your telomere length, which is like a sign of longevity. It's what makes our DNA last longer instead of fraying like the end of a shoestring. They
hmm
increase telomere length just with mindfulness meditation and deep breathing, deep abdominal breathing. Like it increases parasympathetic tone, so we're not in fight or flight. We're in rest and digest, peace and at ease. It positively impacts so many different things. And then tapping, or emotional freedom technique, which is the thing that I taught. which is, you can look it up. There's all kinds of information called the tapping solution and all that, or neuroemotional technique, the other thing that I do, which, you have to work with a practitioner for that. Or I worked with something called the healing codes. I've also worked with something called the emotion code. There's all kinds of things to clear the emotions to help, those are all things that will help pull those toxins out of our bucket so that we become a better version and so that our bucket doesn't overflow.
100%. And there's so many other, widely recognized practices that are, traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic practices that talk about stored emotions affecting
Mhm.
different organs in our body.
Yep.
And I agree 100% that it can definitely affect us in a negative way.
Yeah, for sure.
Such a great topic. I really do love it because it's so deep. It can go in so many different avenues on just how the brain works and, brain chemistry. And it is our control tower, right?
Yeah.
And we perceive things through the world we live in, through our eyes and how we process it up here based on past experiences. And so being able to kind of restructure and rewire as hard as it can be,
Yeah.
but nothing is easy in life. You have to
Yeah.
work at it over and
Yep.
over and over. If it was easy, everybody would do it. We wouldn't be here today, probably talking about it. So
Yeah. Right. Yep.
great topic, great time, and thank you so much for being here once again. I really love it.
Um,
And
You're welcome. You
we
have a
would
it's always great. I always love we decided that we have such good conversations before we hit record. We're just gonna record everything that we say and then share the good things, because we just have this rich conversation. So appreciate it so much.
absolutely always. Well, thank you so much, Teresa, and we'll see you again next week.
All right. Have a good rest of your weekend.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye.